Mosaic, a daily news program from Worldlink TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Welcome to the News in Brief from Abu Dhabi Television. The U.S. forces detained the Iraqi scientist Huda Ammash, who specialized in weapons of mass destruction. A city council is elected in Al-Mosul for the first time since the collapse of the Iraqi regime. The city council includes an Arab head of council, a Kurdish deputy, and Assyrian and Turkmen assistants. Head of the civil administration in Iraq, Garner, declares that a team of 9 people will form an interim government in Iraq by the middle of this month. Now, to our correspondent in Baghdad, Amr Abdel Hamid.
In light of accusations that there is no set American agenda for the Iraqi reality, Garner's announcement raises many questions. Most importantly, will this government achieve its main goals, or will it just be a facade?
Today, the Palestinian Prime Minister Mahmoud Abbas Abu Mazen met with the U.S. Assistant Secretary of the Bureau of Near Eastern Affairs in Ramallah. Meanwhile, the Israeli Knesset convened to discuss the roadmap. Hezbollah says that U.S. and Israeli threats and their demands to dismantle the party will not affect their policies. From Beirut, our correspondent Rafiq Nasrallah.
Hezbollah still insists on their position regarding the situation in southern Lebanon, and Beirut is not responding to the U.S. demands for this region.
This is the end of the brief. Welcome. We begin with this news. The U.S. forces announced that they have arrested one of the most wanted Iraqis in Baghdad, and she is the scientist Huda Saleh Mahdi Ammash, who specialized in the Iraqi weapons of mass destruction program. Ammash is the 53rd name on the U.S. list of the 55 most wanted Iraqis. Ammash was also a member of Al-Ba'ath Party's national leadership. Meanwhile, head of the civil administration in Iraq, Garner, announced that an interim government will soon be formed in Baghdad. It will include past Iraqi opposition members. It is expected that this government will include at least 9 people, adding that their main mission will be to rebuild the country and prepare for democratic elections. Garner made his announcement before leaving for al-Basra in southern Iraq.
Garner's announcement of the interim government and its creation date touched a sensitive nerve. Is his announcement just another statement similar to previous ones? And what will be the form of government? Will it be an interim government or an advisory council? Nevertheless, this time, Garner wanted to explain that the image is becoming clearer. 9 Iraqis from inside and outside of Iraq, and more people to join with the help of the U.S., will represent the meeting point between the Iraqis and the Americans in the future government of Iraq. The Iraqi group must be presented in the National Iraqi Conference. This conference must also have full authority to form an interim government and constitution. Also, it must direct the country towards the path of democratization. The U.S. is moving in the direction of forming an Iraqi interim government. This move comes after Washington has been criticized for its inability to fill the political gap in Iraq. These accusations include Garner's new agenda. The actual political group must meet without any foreign intervention. It would be best if it was sponsored by the United Nations or the Arab League. Only then can the group choose someone to represent the Iraqi people, but not with the presence of the American tanks. Amid the competition of the Iraqi political groups trying to reserve their places in the government under the United States' umbrella, the Iraqi people remain isolated from all these groups claiming to represent them. Garner's timetable for an interim government is translated by analysts as Washington's desire to quickly move forward to make the Iraqis feel that the political gap will be filled. As for the Iraqis, all they can do is wait. Amr Abdul Hamid, Abu Dhabi Television, Baghdad.
Under Saddam Hussein's regime, the Iraqi people were often subjected to imprisonment, paid penalties, and were arrested at any moment when caught with satellite equipment. Today, the world has entered Iraqi homes without censorship. Now the people decide what to watch according to what they want to hear and see. From Baghdad, we have a report from Abdul Qadir Al-Juraidi. For the first time in Iraq's history, Arabic and international satellite television channels, which were previously prohibited to most Iraqis, were made available to the public after the takeover of the state's institutions and the fall of the regime.
This is all the satellite equipment. This equipment can receive all satellite channels. Now, can we watch different channels that we were forbidden by Saddam Hussein? Yes, forbidden by Saddam Hussein. We can see all the channels that we were prohibited by this dictator. Today, I decided to buy the system. But before I was scared. I wasn't able to receive the service. But now I can. It's over. We can get the satellite. It will be our first time, of course.
According to these people, under the previous regime, they were in a closed media circuit. There were 4 government-owned television channels, 2 of which were owned by Saddam Hussein's son, Uday Saddam Hussein. They confirmed to us that now the airwaves have opened to the people.
Saddam Hussein would be on 3 channels from morning until night. Adel Imam created a satire play called The Leader, reflecting Saddam Hussein in every way. It was prohibited before, but now we would like to see the channels available from around the world. In the past, we were restricted to their broadcast. That was all.
The Iraqi government would monitor all its citizens, and if they had equipment or received satellite signals, they would be imprisoned or their equipment would be confiscated, in addition to having to pay a financial penalty. After the regime changed, people's fears were replaced. Despite the high price of the equipment, the markets stay open by offering it to many people who want to watch.
People are rushing to buy this merchandise, but it depends on the prices. Some people can afford it, some people can't, and others are waiting for the prices to fall before they can buy and install the system in their homes so they can watch the different Arabic and international channels.
The entrance of satellite TV into the deserts of Iraq means the entrance of news and pictures from various sources, which may not serve the interests of the United States or Britain, who are currently trying to restore the Iraqi television and radio networks to be used for their own interest in post-Saddam Iraq. Abdul Qadir Juraidi, Abu Dhabi Television, Baghdad.
President Hosni Mubarak's political advisor, Osama al-Bez, denounced on Monday American accusations against Syria. Speaking in a popular and political conference in Cairo, Dr. al-Bez dismissed charges that Syria possesses weapons of mass destruction and is harboring leaders of the toppled Iraqi regime. He noted that such accusations were baseless and untrue. On the Iraq issue, al-Bez stressed that all Iraqis agree on the importance of keeping the country's unity. Israeli soldiers destroyed the southern West Bank family home of a dead Palestinian activist on Monday morning. The Israeli army said in a statement that the soldiers demolished the home near Hebron of Tariq Gaudat Hafiz. The Israeli army has destroyed more than 120 houses belonging to the families of Palestinian resistance fighters since August, when it launched its policy of demolitions. Human rights groups criticize the practice, saying it amounts to collective punishment. Palestinian Prime Minister Mahmoud Abbas, popularly known as Abu Mazen, is to meet American Assistant Secretary of State William Burns on Monday. The meeting, the first encounter with a senior American envoy since Abbas was sworn in, follows talks between Burns and Israeli leaders, including the Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon. Abbas was set to tell Burns that Israel must allow Palestinian President Arafat to be allowed to move freely. The Palestinian Prime Minister said on Sunday that he was ready to meet Sharon and to round up all weapons not in the hands of his security forces, a key demand for the new peace initiative known as the Roadmap, unveiled last week. The plan, drafted by the Quartet, Washington, Russia, the EU and the United Nations, calls for the phased creation of a Palestinian state by 2005 and a freeze of Jewish settlements in the occupied territories. The Israeli parliament, or Knesset, interrupted its holiday to hold a special session on Monday on the international roadmap for the Middle East. The session was requested by both parties in Prime Minister Ariel Sharon's ruling coalition and opposition parties. However, the debate in the Israeli parliament was overshadowed by the abrupt step-down of Labour's left-wing leader, Amram Mitznah, who accused rivals of stabbing him in the back. He said the party, riven with internal strife, was ungovernable. Mitznah led Israel's founding party to its worst electoral defeat in January's general elections and has steadfastly refused to join Sharon's right-wing coalition. Mitznah's departure could open the door to a Labour return to the coalition they broke up last October in a row with Sharon over funding for controversial Jewish settlements. American Civil Administrator Jay Garner told reporters Monday that up to 9 Iraqis representing different opposition factions are to run an interim government to help rebuild the country in the coming months. Garner said as many as 7, 8 or 9 leaders would be working together to provide leadership. He added that he did not know how the collective leadership would function specifically. The retired Lieutenant General referred to Masoud Barzani, leader of the Kurdistan Democratic Party, Ahmed Chalabi of the Iraqi National Congress, Jalal Talabani of the Patriotic Union of Kurdistan, Iyad Alawi of the Iraqi National Accord, and Abdulaziz al-Hakim, whose elder brother heads the Supreme Council for Islamic Revolution in Iraq. Garner said that the group would likely be expanded to include a Christian and perhaps another Sunni figure. Speaking as he prepared to leave on a one-day visit of Iraq's southern capital, Basra, Garner said he expected the newly appointed career diplomat, Paul Bremer, to arrive by next week and take charge of the political process within the post-war U.S. administration. He said that the appointment of someone like Bremer had been planned all along.
The governor of the U.S.-occupied Iraq, Jay Garner, said Monday that a council of up to 9 politicians representing different factions is likely to lead the still unformed interim government in the coming months. Garner told reporters he also expected to be handing over the U.S. role in overseeing Iraq's political process to diplomat J. Paul Bremer. And in the first vote in Iraq since the ousting of Saddam Hussein, different ethnic groups in Mosul have begun electing an interim municipal council.
U.S. Governor of U.S.-occupied Iraq, Jay Garner, said on Monday that up to 9 Iraqis representing different opposition factions are to run an interim government in the coming months, adding that he does not know how the collective leadership would function specifically. The retired Lieutenant General referred to Masoud Barzani, leader of the Kurdistan Democratic Party, Ahmed Chalabi of the Iraqi National Congress, Jalal Talabani of the Patriotic Union of Kurdistan, Iyad Alawi of the Iraqi National Accord, and Abdulaziz al-Hakim, whose elder brother heads the Supreme Council for Islamic Revolution in Iraq. Garner said that group would likely be expanded to include a Christian and perhaps another Sunni figure. Speaking as he prepared to leave on a one-day visit of Iraq's southern capital, Basra, Garner said he expected the newly appointed career diplomat, Paul Bremer, to arrive by next week and take charge of the political process within the post-war U.S. administration. He said the month of May is a key month for getting all of the public services stood up, or at least with a good prospect of being stood up, and getting the law enforcement system back. Garner was responding to the stringent criticism of the slow pace of the U.S. administration to restore security and public services destroyed as a result of the U.S.-led aggression. For his part, Muslim cleric Ayatollah Sayyid Kadhim al-Ha'iri rejected from Iran the formation of an Iraqi government under the authority of foreign countries. His statement was published in Baghdad on Monday in the Al-Dawah Daily. Al-Ha'iri belongs to Ayatollah Sayyid Muhammad al-Sadr's group, who was assassinated in the holy city of Najaf in 1999. He added that an Iraqi government is ought to be elected by the Iraqi people, calling them to stand for the theological center and religious figures in Iraq. On another level, Garner noted that the self-proclaimed mayor of Baghdad, Mohammed Mohsen al-Zubaydi, who was arrested by U.S. forces, had been released after 2 days, adding the condition of his release was that he does not resume his activity of asserting authority in Baghdad. In the meantime, elections for a new local administration in the northern Iraqi city of Mosul begins on Monday, but on the eve of elections, disgruntled locals have criticized the way the city has been run since the end of Saddam Hussein's regime. The council would include 8 governmental bodies: internal, health, commerce, education, municipality, fuel, and public works. But analysts say that these elections would bring back figures who had previously worked in the Saddam Hussein regime and were accused of corruption, as well as names that have no public support, what led to a wave of criticism to the U.S. organized elections. The city of Mosul has been lacking for an administration for more than 3 weeks and was left in chaos, leading to more anger among Iraqis. On Sunday, a U.S. soldier was shot in the head and wounded by an unidentified Iraqi man in Mosul, in another sign of mounting anti-U.S. sentiment in the country.
Iraqis close to the holy city of Najaf have dug new corpses from a mass grave. Officials helping in the excavation said 47 corpses had been dug up, adding they belonged to men and women apparently executed during a 1991 Shiite uprising. Meanwhile, the civil defense chief of Karbala city told Time magazine that his men were finding some 1,000 cluster bombs daily in places U.S. officials said were not targets.
In a new discovery of former Iraqi regime remnants, Iraqis close to the holy city of Najaf have dug corpses from a mass grave on Sunday. At a farmland site near this central Iraqi town, Iraqis clawed through earth to uncover scores of bodies, some with blindfolds and hands tied, of men and women apparently executed during a 1991 Shiite uprising. Bullet casings, combs, coins and watches lay among them. Some had identity cards in their rotting clothes. Yellow twine coated with a coppery crust, possibly blood, bound their wrists. Officials helping in the excavation said 47 corpses had been dug up. On Saturday, as well, Iraqis uncovered another mass grave near the ancient city of Babylon, digging up dozens of bones wrapped in stained blankets and skulls with rectangles cut out of the back. Tens of thousands of Shiites and Kurds are thought to have been killed when Saddam Hussein's forces crushed revolts after Iraqi troops were driven out of Kuwait in the 1991 Gulf War. Meanwhile, the Time magazine reported that the U.S. military may have downplayed the use of deadly cluster bombs by its forces during the aggression on Iraq, while U.S. officials claim that only 26 cluster bombs landed in civilian areas during the fighting. Accounts from Iraqi hospitals, residents and civil defense officials indicate many more fired. Horrific scenes of mutilated Iraqi civilians were clear evidence of the use by US-led forces of this highly controversial weapon. In the town of Hilla alone, tens of civilians were killed, but the exact number of cluster bomb victims remain unknown. Cluster bombs are designed to release hundreds of smaller bomblets that disperse over a wide area, but the bomblets often fall to the ground intact, sometimes killing and maiming the civilians who find them. Moreover, the Karbala civil defense chief told Time his men were finding some 1,000 cluster bombs daily in places U.S. officials said were not targets.
The New Yorker magazine reported that U.S. insistence that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction was based on dubious intelligence from a shadowy Pentagon committee that now dominates U.S. foreign policy. By late 2002, the Pentagon's Office of Special Plans, OSP, had grown to become President George W. Bush's main intelligence source, particularly over Iraq's alleged weapons of mass destruction and links to Al-Qaeda, the magazine reports in its May 12th edition. But the OSP relied on questionable intelligence from the Iraqi National Congress, the exile group headed by Ahmed Chalabi. A former senior Middle East expert with the CIA told reporter Seymour Hersh that the Iraqi National Congress has a track record of manipulating intelligence because it has an agenda. It's a political unit, not an intelligence agency.
Iraqi journalists have elected a new committee to handle the problems of journalists and reporters. The committee is supposed to replace the previous journalism administration that was headed by Saddam's oldest son, Adid. Meanwhile, for the first time since the fall of Baghdad, a newspaper that used to be printed in Al-Sulaymaniyah is now produced in Baghdad. Furthermore, Iraqi medical students have returned to the medical college in Al-Mustansiriya University just 2 months before the end of the school year. For the first time since the fall of Baghdad, a newspaper that used to be printed in Al-Sulaymaniyah, which is controlled by the Kurds, is now produced in Baghdad. Al-Ittihad newspaper is produced by the Journalism Central Office that belongs to the Kurdish National Union led by Jalal Talabani, who used to oppose the former regime of Saddam Hussein. Tens of thousands of copies of the Al-Ittihad newspaper were distributed among the public for free to celebrate the occasion. Abbas al-Badri, the vice president of the newspaper editors, described the occasion as a historical event. Deheb Zayer, the vice president of the journalist committee, said that the Iraqi journalists have elected a new committee to handle the problems of journalists and reporters. The committee is supposed to replace the previous journalism administration that was headed by Saddam's oldest son, Adid. Meanwhile, Iraqi medical students have returned to the medical college in Al-Mustansiriya University just 2 months before the end of the school year. The president of the college, Dr. Aref Abdul Al-Hamid, warned students who are behind that they may not be able to pass this academic year if they do not return to the university as soon as possible. We have started schooling. We began training the students and educating them. I hope that all students will multiply their efforts in this academic year so they will pass, especially when considering that we lost 1 month. We will intensify their education to substitute for the lost time. Furthermore, the school year will be expanded by 1 month to make up for the lost time during the war, hoping that the students will return to their educational level and producing doctors, which the country desperately needs.
بدأ فريق طبي سعودي في إنشاء مركز طبي غرب بغداد بعد يوم واحد من وصول
A Saudi medical team has begun to establish a medical center in Baghdad, 1 day after the arrival of a huge Saudi medical shipment. The Saudi shipment was safeguarded by undercover military to protect the equipment of the huge mobile hospital, which has 100 beds and many Saudi doctors. Saudi authorities say that the shipment includes 15 huge trucks loaded with food, sleeping bags, and a huge quantity of medicine, in addition to the mobile hospital, where different operations can be carried out.
Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation,